Well, I'm so excited today to be here with Kellie Specter, the Chief Engagement and Marketing Officer for the WNET Group in New York. Kellie, so wonderful to have you here. Thank you for joining CMO Pulse.
Thank you for having me, Tania.
So I want to start, before we dive into the specifics of, what I know has been a really exhilarating and grueling time for the world, and I'm sure for you in your role. Tell me a little bit about how are you hanging in? How's your team doing? I feel like everyone I speak to at this point is definitely feeling it. What's your vibe like right now? Can we do a little bit of a temperature check?
So I think my vibe is exhausted. I think we've been doing this for nearly 2 years now, remote working. Let me just say that. And I have a team of 23 people. I have 5 direct reports, but the team is a 23-person team. And I think we're all feeling it. And I think it's hard to see where we're going. It's hard to see the future. We were told a couple of weeks ago by my CEO that we will be returning to the office in January. He thinks it's been pushed now twice. And I think that I'm not sure that anybody really is counting on that. I think we're all just kind of waiting on tenterhooks. Well, will it be January? Will it be March? So in that ecosphere, right, of uncertainty and working from home and just getting by, It's been difficult. It's been challenging to keep the team motivated and, frankly, keep myself motivated. But we have no choice. You just got to keep going.
Well, and motivated, you must keep everyone, right? Because
absolutely.
I refer to, I think, just the description about your organization, and it's about creating inspiring media content and meaningful experiences for diverse audiences nationwide. Whoa. That's a huge, it's a huge remit in ordinary times, but it's got a lot of responsibility attached to it, right?
A lot. As a public media professional and the professionals on my team, it's all about our gift, our service to the public. And so, in a way, we are more being motivated to promote and market our content is so key. You have to be upbeat about it. You have to be, sort of eternally optimistic about where it's going to land and who's going to see it and how they're going to react to it. So motivation is really, really important. And so, I've done a couple of things with my team. For example, coming up on the 28th, we're doing a little Halloween Zoom. We'll do happy hour on virtual happy hours. We have obviously department meetings where we're all together, and I try to keep them light. My own responsibility to the team is doing my one-on-ones with people, checking in, with maybe an admin or a coordinator who I might not see every day or every week, but just making sure I reach out to everyone on the team to make sure that they're doing okay, taking their temperature and making sure that they're motivated and happy. So that helps.
Yeah. And so you're going through it personally, your team's going through this, individually in different ways, I'm sure. And then you also have this big role to sort of stay close to what's happening in culture, to be there for your audiences. How are you threading that needle? And just on a day-to-day basis, I guess, how are you staying close to your audiences just in this sort of fast-changing landscape?
I think obviously through social and through newsletters to our members and donors and viewers, with our promos on the air. And I think we're reinforcing the things that we are reinforcing our value. And, luckily for us, because of the pandemic, and there's a lot of content consumption right now. When people are fatigued with the apps, we are there. And it's not just a second thought, but we have actually grown audience and grown membership in the last year and a half, because people are maybe rediscovering it. People maybe who never knew about public media are consuming it now. We've got this wonderful series with Skip Gates, Finding Your Roots. that's hugely popular and more popular now than it was before the pandemic.
And so it's on social media too.
Huge on social. So it's, social is our touch point, frankly. And it's about making sure that we are keeping our content out there, messaging around inspiration and education, and the trustworthiness of our news products. So that's sort of what we're doing on a daily basis, frankly.
Tell me a little bit about, you had a huge, so you're going through all this, there's all this change, we know that we can only ever see maybe weeks or potentially months ahead of us, right? Like that's sort of where it stops. And then you went and did an entire rebrand, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was it just like a heck, why not? Because everything's happening anyway. We may as well just throw in, maybe one of the most complicated things that you can pull off. Well, what was that?
Sort of. Well, we had been doing some research before the pandemic struck in March. We had been from the fall to January. I have this wonderful, I call him a branding guru. His name is Peter Hempel. He and I have been working together, and some other members of my team had been working together to do a rebrand for the organization. It turns out we run about 10 channels, cable channels, terrestrial TV channels. We have a news vertical. We have a brand new all arts channel. And so in thinking about all of the properties that we run, it used to be one television station started back in 1962. It's now 10 different channels that we own and run and operate and program and market. And so Peter came up with the fantastic idea to call us a group, the WNET Group, with all of our assets as part of the logo. So we had come up with this concept, but we were kicking it down the road. We were thinking, maybe, November of 2020, maybe January 2021, we will do this rebrand. And then in the middle of the pandemic, I want to say it was May of 2020, Peter and I were having this conversation, and I remember hanging up with him and thinking, why don't we just pull the trigger now? Why wait? We're in the middle of this chaotic time. Chaos sometimes brings opportunity. Mm-hmm. There are gaps, and people are kind of a little crazed, and there's a lot of chaos. And I'm really lucky because I work for a CEO who used to run NBC News. And I just have to, his name is Neil Shapiro. He ran a newsroom during 9/11. I mean, this is a man who chaos, breaking news, like he's the calm in the storm. He's the leader that you want in this kind of situation. And I went to him and I was like, Neil, what do you think? And he just said, go for it. Go for it. Can you do it? I said, yeah. He said, go for it. And that made me so happy because he understands the opportunity in chaos. And so we just started. We actually created the graphics and did all of the groundwork. And then we just launched officially in March. But we started in 2020, laying the groundwork, getting the graphics together, doing our research. So yeah, it was a huge deal. It was a lot. And then this past summer, we also rebranded our New Jersey network. We have a public television network in New Jersey called NJTV, and we rebranded those properties, and now it's called NJPBS. So it gives us an identity with PBS, and it was a really a very successful rebrand there too.
And when you when you worked on this idea of sort of pulling everything into a group, how did you find? So it sounded like you had the air cover and you had the support, but in the end, I mean, you still had to make it happen. You had to sort of bring your team along, and I'm sure on one hand people are excited, the other hand they're like, "Are you absolutely bananas?" Can you tell me about what that process was like? And I think just one part of my question is, it's a very bold, innovative, courageous thing to do in a time when I think, candidly, most people were just ducking for cover. Yeah. So can you talk about it a little in the context of that?
Again, I looked at the chaos as an opportunity. And also, if you think about it, chaos, and the unknown, uncertainty, you're thinking with a different part of your brain, right? In my opinion, you're thinking with the creative side of your brain. The linear side of your brain is that's all gone. That's blown up. So I think so. That's number one, right? It's sort of like, okay, why not do this? And then it was about motivating my team because they all have full plates. And then I'm like, guys, we're going to do this rebrand. And so I think I'm lucky in that I have a really wonderful team and also collaborators, because, marketing has to collaborate with everybody because, not everybody reports up into marketing. So I had to collaborate with colleagues who really saw it as an opportunity, as an exciting opportunity, and to be part of it. I had a task force that I created internally. So it was just about motivating my team, motivating the task force, getting people excited about the possibility and the opportunity, and then motivating them to sort of do the work. And we all worked so hard, nights, weekends, and that's what sort of made it happen. I'm not sure if I'm answering all of your question, but
wow, yeah.
But that's sort of the way it was. It was about having an idea, just pulling the trigger, and then getting people motivated to make it happen.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'll ask you this question in a moment, but oftentimes for big decisions, people will lean more to the intrinsic belief in the idea, in the creative, or the data to back it up, right? And it sounds like in this instance, it's sort of, we were in an unprecedented time, right? There was no playbook for this, but that you saw that opportunity. Has that idea of like looking at chaos or something unexpected as an opportunity, is that a theme throughout your career? Is that sort of something that's particular how you see the world, or where does that come from?
That's me. That's me. I have I grew up in a big boisterous family, and there was a lot going on. And I was always the thoughtful one at the table filled with people screaming and arguing about politics. I was always the person who was the observer and the analyzer. And I think I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with chaos. And I think that a lot of people are not. And so not a lot of people, some people are not. It's just that I am. So I think that I wasn't afraid. I think I just wasn't afraid to pull the trigger during a chaotic time.
When you think back across your career, if you had to pick one or potentially two inflection points or big decisions that have been impactful and that either prepared you for this big thing you just did or just impacted who you are today as a marketing leader, what would those one or two things be?
Oh boy, that's a really great question. I think because my career's been, it's been mostly in media and entertainment, and I think that, well, I'll just boil it down to deciding, making the decision to move to New York City was a huge piece for me. That was life changing, not just life changing, it was career changing. It was everything. I'd never done television before. I had been radio, and the decision to move here, I didn't have a job when I moved here, and it was having just the faith that everything would turn out the way I needed it to turn out. I had a marketing background in radio and the record business and the concert business. So I had this sort of entertainment marketing background. And I knew that if I moved to New York City, that I could make it happen for myself somewhere. The decision to start freelancing at WNET, Channel 13 back in the day, was a huge decision for me. I started freelancing there, and then at my current place of employment, and it just snowballed. So, I'm not sure that let me put it this way, Tania, I made a lot of little decisions before I made the big ones. Mm. And I think the one big one was my move to New York City with no job and not knowing anyone in the city.
And just making that leap of faith.
Had to.
When you think about how you approach marketing, so there's something that's about you kind of, which is personality and what you're comfortable with. How do you lead as a marketer, and to what degree do you balance creativity and your gut and a sense of what's right with insights. You described yourself as well as, one to sometimes sit back and analyze what's happening. How do you balance those two things as a marketer? And do you think you're dominated by one or the other?
That's such a good question. Ask the first part again.
When you think about yourself as a marketing leader, how do you believe that you are more gut-based and more sort of creativity-led, believing intrinsically in the idea, or do you tend to be more governed by insights, data, things that improve?
Okay, I got it. So for me, it's always audience first, right? As any good marketer is, it's audience first. And then when you think about the audience first, then the gut comes in. Okay, well, if my audience, we have an older audience in public media, and if my audience is 50 plus, and some content comes in, we had a fabulous, great performances, performance documentary with Nas, and this was a few years ago, and so it was okay. Well, I know my audience is 50 plus. And I know this is Nas, and how do I make this happen? And so it was looking at the data, but then using the creativity and my gut, and how do we do this? Where do we find people? How do we market this to 50 plus year olds? And so I'm not sure that I'm dominated by either. I think they work hand in hand, frankly. I always pay attention to data, but then I think data is data. And I think marketing is so creative. Marketing is, how can we take the data and inspire and enlighten that segment of the population with this new way of thinking or new way of consuming? I'm not sure if that is answering your question, but I think for me it's a balance. It's not one nor the other.
With that in mind, how do you innovate as a marketer? And how do you approach innovation? And I think we're just for context, I'm sure that, so you have your audience first, but then you go, gosh, TikTok is exploding. This other thing looking for my attention. There's this other way to, how do you balance that? And how do you know what's right for your audiences?
So I'm just going to come right out and tell you, I rely on my young staff. They mentor me. They mentor up. I'm an open book. My staff comes to me and says, I think we should do A, B, and C on TikTok or Snapchat or whatever. And it's like, okay, let's do it. Let's experiment. I'm very open to experimentation. And they know better than me. I mean, I'm the CMO. So, there's a certain level where I am. I'm not day to day on TikTok, but my staff is. So why don't I just listen to them? Because they're there. So I guess the innovation comes in having faith in my younger staff and not being afraid to have them mentor up, and also it's the spirit of experimentation so that they know, well, we're going to try this. And if it works, great, we're going to keep doing it. If it doesn't work, that's not failure. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. So yeah, that's, for me, that's innovation comes from being open to what's around me.
And how do you create that culture in your team? Because I feel like it's something that people talk about of failure is okay, failure is learning, and yet failure is also the top fear that people have in the workplace, right? So how do you create a culture where that is in fact something that people are comfortable with and are willing to take risks around?
To me, it all comes down to the support that you give your team. It all comes down to the trust that you give your team and the faith that you give your team. I have one young woman who works for me. She's fantastic. And she's always thinking. She's always, a couple people on my team like that, always thinking, always, well, what about if we do this here? And I give her the freedom to do that. But it's also, well, keep your eye on that, because guess what? If that doesn't work, if that is tanking, then you're going to have to pivot. So you need plan B. So I think it's creating a culture of trust. And again, I love working with young people. because to me, well, A, they're the future, and B, I learned so much. So I think it's just allowing them to have that freedom, that creative freedom.
I want to dig in on that a little because I feel like there's a lot of conversation around, gosh, this is such a different generation. We don't know how to hire. We don't know how to retain. Are you doing something differently when you're recruiting? Like, how are you approaching finding talent and then taking care of them so that you are feeding their strengths and, and providing a place for them to grow?
I think, again, when we hire, for me, again, I have a staff that vets people, and then I sort of am the last person to look. I really rely on my direct reports to hire. I'm the last word, so if something really it doesn't sit with me, we have a conversation about that. But I allow the people who come in to be creative. And I'm not threatened or afraid by a very big personality and big creative personality, right? And so when you get them in the door, then it's all about trust. It's all about, and I'm the kind of manager that my first inclination is to trust. And then if you lose my trust, that's a problem. But if I'm not one of the managers who go, well, I'm not going to trust that person, they have to prove themselves to me. That's not the way I manage. And I think that gives people who are responsible and creative just a platform to spread their wings. My whole I'm the oldest person on my staff. Everyone's younger than me. And I'm really lucky, I think.
Yeah, you sure are. It sounds like it's a very delicately balanced ecosystem that often is out of balance. So with that in mind, maybe referring back to where we started this conversation is, what do you see as the pathway back, quote unquote? What do you think about for the future of work and your team, knowing that, like, yes, I'm hearing from a lot of people, gosh, super productive, getting a lot done, but really feeling it. How do you envision the pathway back, and what do you think perhaps that we can change about how we work that can bring some learnings from this pandemic time?
Well, first of all, I think that work has changed forever. I think we all know that. I think there's a blending of personal and work. They were so separate before. And now they're not separate anymore. And there's blessings to that and there's curses to that. The blessing is I'm remote working and I can run out and do an errand in the middle of my day if I need to do that. And it's no problem. So it's the blending of the personal and the professional that I think the curses, as we chatted about before I got on camera with you, is that the boundaries aren't there, right? So the way that sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but here's what I think. I think that the way back is, in my opinion, a couple of days of work of a week in the office, 2-3 days a week in the office. So the 3-day work week in person, right? Let's say. Then you've got a couple other days when you're on Zoom. I think that works for a lot of people because we need that 3D. We need that hallway conversation. We need to see our colleagues. By the same token, having personal time, getting up and you can be on your pajamas on a Zoom call. You can be in your pajamas, let's face it, not having to get to work, not having to commute. So I think there's this, it's a new way of being. It's a new way of being in your life, in your work life, in your personal life. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she said to me, I was always so 100% work oriented, and now I'm not that way anymore. I'm very uncomfortable with it, right? And I thought that was really interesting because it is more of a blending of the personal and the professional. And as a result, I think cultures in companies, they're already changed, but I think they're going to change even more.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's unavoidable. I think the companies that are too quickly just trying to flick back to exactly the archetype of pre are going to really struggle for talent and for loyalty, because it just isn't realistic given what's there. But it is, I do worry, like I feel like there's a rush, particularly in New York right now, to have meetings in person and all of that. You're like, okay, whoa, like, okay, but let's be thoughtful about how we roll this out so that it doesn't just, become a slightly less effective version of what used to be.
That's 100% right, Tania. And I also think it's about strategy. Like, strategically, how do we move forward? Let's put together a plan. Because this, rush to meetings right now, that's sort of a one-off. Like, let's really talk about the structure moving forward. And then we have some sort of something to work from, right? And I think that it's important for something like that to be in place at companies.
Yeah. What is marketing in your own words, if you were to describe what you do?
It's morphed so much. When I first started 100 years ago in the radio business, it was called promotion back then, right? Marketing kind of didn't exist. Marketing was the numbers crunchers. And those are the folks that assisted the salespeople in using data to get people to buy TV spots, buy radio spots, et cetera. It's so morphed. It's everything now. It's PR. It's media relations, earned media. It's research. It's analytics, right? It's promotion. We call that marketing, but it's a lot of different things. It's just a sort of an amalgam of different components, which really the bottom line is to get viewers engaged with your content, in my case, with your content. And ultimately, in my case also, is to convert them into donors. So what is marketing anymore? I mean, I think that's the bottom line, getting viewer, consumer engagement, and then converting them into, consumers of your product. So that's in a nutshell.
Last question for you. With everything that you now know and have learned, and this can incorporate perhaps what you've learned throughout the pandemic as well, if you could go back to the start of your career and offer yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
To not be so reserved. When I was younger, I was very reserved. I didn't get more outgoing and sort of more idea driven until I was later in my career. I think it would have been fun in my 20s to have been a little more outgoing. So that's a personality thing for me. I think that's what I would say to myself. Like, just go for it. Just put yourself out there, go for it, and don't stop.
For anyone who might really resonate there, what held you back and what helped you break through from that?
I've always been really shy when I was younger. And so always afraid to make a mistake. I think a lot of people are that way, just afraid to make a mistake. And so I was hesitant to do things because I was so afraid to make a mistake. And then once you get out there and you get some chops and you get some failures under your belt, then it's sort of like mistakes are okay. Mistakes are okay. And you know what? I can do this, and it can fail. I failed before. It's just about that growth, working through those times when things didn't work. And I think that's what helped me.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Kellie. It was so wonderful to chat with you. I really look forward to hearing about more great new things, ideas, and content emerging from your teams, and just want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tania.